Thank you. It's my great pleasure to introduce Herin Shukla. We always deliberate about, we always try to remember the first time we met, but I don't know when it was, but it was some time ago. And it's been my great pleasure to watch Herin's terrific work growing the program at EY from just 4 people in the Philadelphia office, as I recall, to I believe what is today the largest program that I know of in the corporate world. Herin's experience spans more than 20 years across accounting, strategy, automation, innovation, and change management. He currently leads the internal automation and innovation efforts at Ernst & Young LLP and is the founder of Neurodiverse Centers of Excellence at EY Global. He's the strategic link at EY Global responsible for converting the neurodiversity inclusiveness effort into commercial application for exceptional client service and tangible ROI. And I'm going to now turn it over to Herin Shukla. Thank you so much for joining us.
All right. Well, Rob, thank you. And thank you for Ivy for having me today. Let me step back and break down a little bit of the introduction. Again, as Rob said, my name is Herin Shukla. I'm the global leader of neurodiversity at EY, professional consulting, professional services firm, about 320,000 individuals in 150 countries and 700 cities around the world. And as we are servicing, supporting our clients across industry and sector, the agenda for transformation through creativity, complex problem solving, the use of data and emerging technology has not only been a constant, but as you all could appreciate, the last few years has really caused a tremendous disruption for which many organizations, unfortunately, have not survived the last 2 years. And we realize that it is the most agile and resilient organizations that are creating stakeholder value, not just shareholder value, but value for communities, value for supply chains, value in products, and how we are contributing to the overarching ESG agenda, the environmental, social, governance agenda. It's really the social pillar that we realize is where sustainability lives for an organization and the ability to create value. All of this is the backdrop. Rob, when you and I met years ago, when EY was first thinking about how do we create and accelerate the transformation journey, not only for ourselves at EY, but for all of the clients and companies across industry and sector that we are really responsible for bringing and creating new value. And so it's interesting for me as a business leader, not as a diversity, equity, and inclusion professional, not as an HR professional, but as I think about where do you find and build innovation capacity and new opportunities to create value in the world, this was my introduction 7 years ago to this topic of neurodiversity. Let me define that for a moment, and then I'll pause, Rob, to see if you have any thoughts or if this is the track that's helpful for the audience. But neurodiversity represents the realm of cognitive differences in the world. So neurodiversity is like biodiversity. It includes all of us, but there is a segment, a minority of the world's population, argued somewhere between 7 to 22%. So let's say, for lack of a better assessment, 15% of the world's population has an inherent cognitive difference, meaning that this is the portion of the population that is hardwired to think, approach, digest the world a little bit or a lot different.
Did that freeze for everyone else?
Yeah.
Okay.
We will let it play because often the connection resets itself, and we're on the IV server, so it's possibly a connection issue. So.
Okay, we'll just. Yep, he's gonna come back, I think, now. Oh, Brenda.
So hopefully this will help. So Rob, as we talk about EY's journey, innovation, transformation, unlocking and finding new areas of value creation in the world, I'll pause for a second and see if there's any particular areas that you'd like me to touch on, or just keep kind of going through the journey.
So I think it would be good to hear the journey, partly because your program has grown so fast, right? I mean, and it has grown so large. I think we'd also be interested in why you think that is, right? I mean, one of the things that seems, from my understanding of the EY program, is that it really is driven by demand from the business, right? That the business, all the offices seem to want one of these centers of excellence, right? And I don't think I've seen that anywhere else. I just wonder what you think explains it. And yeah.
Yeah, Rob, thank you. You've actually hit upon a unique nuance that I think is often missed in the world. When we think about value creation, it's often this mutually exclusive choice between purpose or profits. And we were very deliberate that we were going to go right down the middle and hit both. And the business driver, the demand for talent, was the leading indicator and driver behind how are we not only bringing new talent in and building it, but what products and solutions are we creating that then will be commercially viable and, frankly, will engage our clients and the market in new ways that will drive both increased brand value for EY, increased relationship value with our buyers, and then lastly, how are we increasing employee engagement in a more purpose-driven manner so that it isn't just the neurodivergent population that we're employing, but we're effectively built a equity and belonging amplifier, because as you all are hearing from me, neurodivergence, dyslexia, dyspraxia, ADHD, autism, dyscalculia, this touches race, age, gender, sexual orientation. And so the belonging amplifier is a very visible, tangible way of telling our own employee workforce as well as our community, we see you, we acknowledge you, we value your differences. And Rob, all of these reasons pulled together are what's driving effectively the return on investment. If I use pure business terms here to say the demand that we've now launched in 7 countries around the world, and we've been running at 90+% retention for artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, data analytics, and data science capabilities. The hardest to attract, the hardest to retain, and one of the hardest to actually grow. It's been this amazing cycle behind, I would say, igniting curiosity, triggering a sense of real purpose, both from an organizational, individual perspective, and creating the psychological safety of belonging. And when you put that stack together, curiosity, purpose, and belonging, all of a sudden now your stakeholders, which is your employees, your supply chain, your customers and clients, are all attracted to something that says, this isn't just a nice to do, let's feel good once a year, 1 month a year. and celebrate, for example, autism. April is Autism Awareness Month. But let's talk about the unique value of differences. And I think that there is, Rob, an inflection point that's been happening. In fact, probably the last 5 to 10 years, more greater amplified in the last 2 years, where individuals strongly want to be recognized and supported for their unique differences. And massive organizations like EY have often created these channels of recruiting where hiring, training individuals to really become more of the same. That inflection point is now really showing through in the value creation chain, and why we continue to get more demand based upon the skills that we could bring and the value versus a parent or somebody that says, I'm so passionate about neurodiversity because my son or daughter or brother or so on. So we've really shifted the nuance from a social play on from a corporate social responsibility standpoint, a pure feel good Samaritan type of approach from a CSR standpoint, to say it's really the business value and drivers that are going to create value in the world. And Rob, this is what is almost a self-perpetuating demand cycle that we now use, again, to selfishly and commercially convert our brand relationship value into product, solution, and innovation potential. So I'll pause real quick, Rob, and see if that was helpful in addressing your point.
Yeah, very much so. I think I'll wait to ask if Chloe or Juana or Annika have questions they'd like to ask.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, and really great work. You've on the side already touched on the pandemic. Have you seen any changes in your program, in the demand for those excellence centers, or any other changes that happened due to the pandemic and all the changes, remote working, isolation at home, and all of those things that we've all experienced?
Yeah, that is a fantastic question. And I love that question only because what we've seen in the pandemic is not going to go away. This is a new way of working. We say the 3 W's that have changed. It's the workplace that has changed. It's the worker that has changed. And it is the actual work itself that has changed. And we don't ever think things are going back to where they were before. And I would be remiss not to acknowledge, I think first and foremost, you touched on the word isolation. There has been some real struggle, not only in the neurodivergent community, but across the board, where individuals are taking stock of what's important in their lives. And I think that the flexibility that the pandemic has forced the entire world into at the same time, which clearly is a phenomenon that no one would have ever imagined as a scenario, that phenomenon has created unique opportunities. So while you have the challenges from an isolation perspective, the opportunity side is we're now seeing the ability to access, onboard, and deploy and support unique talent pools around the world, regardless of their physical location. And for our neurodivergent or neurodistinct populations, it's the 15% or so that fall in that range, being close to your support systems, whether it's your family, whether it's where you grew up, whether it's the familiarity of your support circle, that has been such a critical component to increasing, for example, productivity. And so we have seen the need for digital transformation, as I think the world has seen, increase tenfold. And as at the same time, the need for cybersecurity, the need for cloud technology, all of these emerging technologies have now become very much a necessity and mainstream. I think the other thing that we're finding is that the most agile and resilient organizations really come down to where your team members feel psychologically safe. And I used this term previously. I think that we're seeing that there is success in, from a management and leadership perspective, when you understand how to create the best environment, regardless of whether it's physical or it's virtual. And I think that that ability to become that transformative leader where communication and connectivity, and I don't mean just from a internet perspective or bandwidth connectivity, I mean person-to-person connectivity, requires transformational leaders to understand how to adjust to each person. And we've all seen Zoom meetings where someone's dog or cat shows up or their child shows up, and yes. we say, this is real life. This is what actually is happening. And I think transformative leadership, there is a burgeoning and necessity around what management looks like and how do we train and capture these data points so that future leaders are much more adept at this agile hybrid environment, which I think we can all recognize is not going to go away anytime.
Sure. I'll ask a question next if that's so more and more corporations are looking into this neurodiversity employment thing. Ernst & Young has so much experience with it now. Do you have any intention of layering in neurodiversity practices with your greater organization? As right now, you're very much in the parallel structure. And why or why not?
Yeah, Chloe, that is a fantastic question because we know that if we go back to the word sustainability, we will never be sustainable if you run a siloed program that's always in parallel and that's not a core integrated part of how you create a delivery network, meaning how resources are used. And what we've been doing in the last 7 years has been creating those avenues and the connections, which include a change in process, a change in protocol, which include the recognition of unique accommodations that maybe individuals may need. And all of this has now pivoted us to where we've reached a maturation point, particularly in the US right now. Some of our other member firms around the world are probably still thinking about it and getting there. But we absolutely have now created an ability to be on par. So the NCOE in the US, frankly, no longer needs to be a center of excellence. We've achieved the model and the processes by which connectivity to the core parts of our business are already laid. The pipes are already laid. But there's an interesting point, Chloe, in your question. Integration doesn't mean assimilation. It actually means changing the way that you work. And I think that is what we're now seeing in terms of this organizational ability to rise up the value chain. We realize that if we take different components of our workforce and basically, again, harmonize them to be all the same ways of working, we're going to lose both the innovation edges as well as the agility part. So I think that it is a change management journey, Chloe, that we've done with the absolute goal that we don't need centers of excellence, in a couple of years, because we're fully integrated in the way that UI does business.
So, Annika, it looked like you wanted to ask something. I have a question too, but you go ahead.
Okay. Thanks, Rob. And yeah, I wanted to ask, what was something for you personally, but also for EY as an organization, it was maybe something unexpected or surprising in their journey that you didn't anticipate?
Yeah, well, that's such a great question. There are two things that we learned that were very surprising. And one was there is a perception around the amount of overhead required to manage a different workforce. And I'll be perfectly honest with you, the amount of overhead often in business terms is converted into how much is this going to cost us and how much bandwidth do we need to do it, and can we afford to do this? What we learned is that the new ways of working with our neurodivergent team members, I'll give you some examples. Our managers are having maybe half an hour touch points every single week with their team members. Well, that in fact is a universal application that we should do with everybody. And it is reducing time that we would then spend otherwise. And so the amount of accommodations are much less than we would have ever thought for them to be, whether it be noise canceling headsets that some individuals need, or it is, one of our team members has 4 different screens for his computer because he segments out different tasks on each of the screens, and it allows his brain that is jumping all over the place to be more structured. So the first surprise is the accommodations requirement is much lower than we thought it to be. The second and the most exciting surprise for us was the creativity and innovation capacity when you allow individuals who think differently to actually solutionize, and you're not very prescriptive. You just explain to them what is the end goal of where you'd like to be, and then let them figure out the journey. And the amount of innovation that we've seen when we've kind of allowed individuals to say, you have a different background, you have a different way of approaching problems, and your ideas, where may sound very differently to us, are actually transformational in nature. And I think that was part of the business driver. And I answered Rob's question, why we're seeing so much demand, because we can reel off now 100 different examples of innovation value, and it's coming at a very rapid pace. And so all of these surprises allowed us to adjust as we matured through this journey. But hopefully that helped answer the question.
So I think we have about 10, 11 minutes left. Is that right? Yeah, I think that's about right. So Herin, I want to try to pull some of the things that I think some of the themes I think I'm hearing in what you're saying together. And one of the and kind of hold it up to a hypothesis that we're thinking about when we do our research, and that is the idea that these programs might actually be a way of building management capability, right? You said earlier, what is it that management looks like? And I think the suggestion was that is changing. You were talking about things like managing people remotely. I know the last time you and I talked, you said like you were one of the very few people in the building downtown there in Dallas. And another thing that you and I have talked about, and when we were on the call with the Frist Center, it was a big subject of discussion. You alluded to it today, the Great Resignation, right? That's kind of changed the balance of power in some ways for managers. And the other thing I wanted to bring up is when we were writing the case on your program there, one of your senior executives, and I apologize, I can't remember who exactly said this, but she said, she was a very senior executive who was in charge of talent management, I think. And she said, we've stopped asking the question about fit and instead started asking, is this person additive to our character or to our culture, is what she said. And so I wonder if you could just say, because you raised this question earlier, how are these programs changing the rest of the organization and the way that managers manage?
Yeah, Rob, what excites me most about this question is most organizations think that they are lending a hand to allow these new dimensions of talent to come into their organization. What we realized very early on was when we stop talking and listen to them, which is hard sometimes for consultants to do. I will admit that. But when we listen to the quietest voices, we're hearing their suggestions on new ways of working. And some of these ways drove us very early on to be comfortable in a hybrid environment, and the use of technology to make connections amongst people. And as we know, change in any organization, change to any leader often is disruptive. And we started to look at this disruption as a positive force because we say, if we don't disrupt ourselves, we will be disrupted. There's no doubt about that. And so I think that we're starting to, and we started this probably a good 5 years ago, when we started to parlay and amplify the lessons learned from a neurodiversity center of excellence standpoint, and almost started to project and overlay this template into other parts of EY's organization, which we found we did not have to push this. There was a natural pull for different parts of our organization who had been thinking about change. They knew they had to change their processes. And here we have had to deliberately figure out what the levers are that align process, protocol, policy, procedure, and people, right? All those P's together. So, Rob, I think that the agile and resilient organization is recognizing what we are learning from these almost innovation incubators that we build. That's how we think about our NCOE as an incubator around innovation, not only around product, but around organizational behavior and alignment. And so there's probably a lot of pieces that we would love to unpack as we start thinking about these lessons learned. And frankly, Rob, as you know, you've seen our journey in the last 7 years, where what we just launched in Manchester in the United Kingdom is probably version 6 of what we launched in Philadelphia back in March 2016. And each version has subsequently gotten a little bit better and stronger. So lots of pieces there that I think what I've benefited from, if I'm honest, is having enough support from my leadership, but also having that accountability where they said, we don't have, Herin, for you, a blank check just to figure this out. And we need you to produce for us. And that pressure, Rob, actually created the momentum to say, this is a business imperative I'm running. It's not a CSR program. I think that balance of pressure is part of what opened up the channels for organizational change.
Very good. Thank you. Oana?
Yes, thank you so much. I think the questions and especially the answers are so encouraging. And over the last week, we've heard a lot about flexibility, that the future of work is flexible, period. That flexibility in itself is the new coordination. It's the new prerogative. It's the new, that it needs to become a taken for granted modality of organizing and radically replace and rapidly replace the status quo, which was much more lock and step organizing. Can I invite you to comment about this seeming paradox between careful planning, segmentation support, and utmost flexibility, especially as it applies to a neurodiverse workforce?
Yeah, absolutely. This question is important because, again, I go back to a default perception that many organizations have, which is we have to be extremely prescriptive. We have to draw tight boundaries around what we're going to do with a neurodivergent population, because if we don't, we may spin out of control. We won't end up in a good place. And I think what we've learned, going back to Rob's question along the way, and I think it ties to the flexibility component, not only to our neurodivergent team members, but to everybody, that is so important during this great resignation, which is, how do you meet your employees where they are? We recognized very early on from the neurodivergent population that each individual, whether they're autistic or dyslexic or both or some combination thereof, are all uniquely different. And it is our job to create that psychological safety and trust such that those employees are comfortable asking for what they need. And I think that trust building mechanism is the fulcrum, the balance between how do you drive a structured approach, but yet has the flexibility at an individual level that is accommodating for different folks. And I'm probably giving a very simplistic answer right now to that, but I do think that often the paradigm or the paradox has been either or. You either get highly structured or completely flexible. I think the model that we have organically seen now is you actually need both, but you need them at different points and parts of your process. But at the end of the day, if you don't create that strong bond of trust between individuals, between the manager and the folks that they're in charge of, then you'll never ever evolve into what does Herin need today versus what does Herin need 2 years from now, because my life has changed and maybe my needs have changed as well. So I think that this is part of what organizational change that we're going to see. And frankly, this is going to separate the winners and losers in the Great Resignation, because I think people will say, as long as I can get what I need, then I'm happy to be here. Sometimes it's pay, but many times it's everything else surrounding the compensation that critically feels to an individual, I belong here. So.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Herin. I think we're down to the last minute or so. But as always, really interesting and insightful. And I appreciate you spending your Friday afternoon with us in this way. I'll let Oana and Annika, as the organizers, say the last word here.
Please, Annika first.
Yeah, thank you so much. Very great insights, as Rob just said. Great work you're doing. And yeah, again, also thank you for spending your Friday afternoon with us.
We appreciate the message and we appreciate the conversation. We will shortly be in touch with the ability to keep the footage with your permission. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a great Friday.
You too.
You too, and a great weekend.
Bye-bye.
Bye. And thank you, Rob, so much for making this possible.
Yep, this is a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right.